This is the Fresh Ice Podcast.
Punches him while he's down. That's a mistake. The captain tempted to twist his head off like a bottle cap.
George Laraque and Ty Domi are going at one another. Laraque's hit him a couple of good left hooks.
Tries to split the defense and walk in. Nice move. Another nice move. He scored. What a goal. It doesn't get any better than this.
Here are your hosts, Brian Goralnik and John Gallo.
Yes, Fresh Ice. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in alongside John Gallo. It's Brian Goralnik, and we're back. Second episode as we're doing this weekly here, John. Happy to be here again with you. And listen, we got a great show for you. Got a lot to come to. John, when I was on my way here, actually, I was thinking about a couple ways to talk about Fresh Ice, mention Fresh Ice, and I instantly thought of maybe I should intro this show like Budweiser did and be like, Fresh Ice! And then I decided against that. And I think, you know what? I did it anyways. I think it was for the better of the show. But certainly you guys can let us know. Tweet at us, at Fresh Ice Pod, all one word. You could certainly find us on Facebook. Same thing, Fresh Ice or at Fresh Ice Pod. Listen to our shows on YouTube. All that's going to be there. We post it not only on Twitter, Facebook, but also YouTube. If you want to get a hold of us and you do not have a Twitter, you could certainly email us. If you don't have an email, I don't think you're even listening to our show, so you better get yourself a Gmail account. They're free. We are at freshicepod@gmail.com. John, got a lot to get to in this show. Last show I think we hit the half-hour mark, which was a good number. The more we progressed, I think the more we want to expand this show. We got a lot to get to, some recent news, even though we're in the middle of the summer still. Getting closer, though. We are, I think I saw on Instagram today, or it might have been the other day, I think we're Brad Marchand days away from the NHL season.
Yes, we are. We've actually had quite a bit of news in the last week alone. It's kind of surprising for a pretty slow offseason as so far. Mm-hmm. This part of the offseason, we're seeing a lot of the restricted free agents and those guys that are still under team control being signed. And with that, our first big signing so far.
Yes.
Tampa Bay extended their Vezina-winning goalie, Andrei Vasilevsky, with an 8-year, $76 million contract. It's $9.5 million annual average value. It's a pretty big contract for a goalie and for a team with a lot of good talent that are under pretty big contracts. It's kind of, and with Braden Point, another one of their unrestricted free agents still needing to be signed, it's kind of limiting them on cap space there, but they did make another move to clear some more cap space to sign Braden Point. They sent Ryan Callahan to Ottawa in a trade from goalie Mike Condon, who is way less money. It's weird because now they have 6 goalies on their roster. They lose Ryan Callahan, who is basically told that he's forced to retire based to a really bad back injury.
Correct. Yeah, he has a degenerative back condition. He's 34 years old, 1 year left on his 6-year deal that he signed with Tampa Bay back in 2014. So he's on long-term IR. I guess that's kind of just Ottawa eating the contract.
Yeah, I just don't get why Ottawa is going out of their way to help Tampa Bay. Like, you're divisional rivals, kind of. I mean, yeah, Ottawa's bad, but you're in the same division. You normally don't see something like this.
No, the swap of the draft picks, I think, is part of it. When you look at it, Tampa Bay is getting a 6th-round pick, and Ottawa is receiving a 5th-round pick. So they do move up around with the move. I don't think Condon was going to see a single game, whether it be starting or as a backup in a game for Ottawa. So it's kind of dumping a player they never had plans for and don't want to put in their system because, I mean, Condon's been around. So, you wonder how much is left in him and obviously no more left in Ryan Callahan. So it really is just a move to move up around.
I guess so. I mean,
but it clears the cap
contract
space.
It clears cap space, but Ottawa helping a divisional rival is so strange to me, especially in this regard. Like, Ottawa, you're horrible, and you did nothing at the draft that really made an impact. You're going to have another high pick next year. Why are you doing this? To help them? If it was a Western Conference team, I could see, yeah, maybe. But why are you helping Tampa, the team that just destroyed everyone in the regular season last year?
I see your point. I guess I get your point is that if it was maybe a West Coast team, you then think about doing it. But because personally, listen, Ottawa's got to look in the mirror. They got to know what Tampa Bay has.
Yeah.
And if they can move up a draft pick for a guy that they're not going to play, then I think it ends up being worth it. And again, you mentioned to Tampa Bay, it's very much worth it because they do have to sign Braden Point. I'm hearing that they'll probably get a deal done before training camp. But real quick, back to what you were talking about with Vasilevsky and his deal. To put it in perspective, he's the best goalie in the league. He won the Vezina. Who's the best player in the league? And we'll get to all the awards, but last year Nikita Kucherov won the best player of the league. He was the Hart Trophy winner. They're both making the same contract. They have been lined up equivalent years and dollar amounts. They are both on the same contract. So I guess it's fair. Vasilevsky's young. I think it's a good move.
I just think this is limiting Tampa in the future because you're going to see what Chicago has been going through in the last 3 years because of the Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane contracts, where now they're having to dump all this payroll and they're barely making the playoffs, if making the playoffs at all, because they didn't make it last year or the year before that. I just think you're going to see in 5 years Tampa dealing with that, especially now when they're having to re-sign young stars like Braden Point. And you already have Steven Stamkos on a big contract too.
Well, I think that's the pointing arrow right there. That, in my opinion, unless there's a trade because something falls apart in Tampa Bay, I think Steven Stamkos, the captain, is the first man out the door, just like Joe Pavelski was in San Jose.
He just re-signed, a year ago?
Yeah.
To a big contract there.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean, we could pull up his contract. He's still under contract for quite a while. So, I mean, they have him locked up, just like they have Kucherov, just like they have Vasilevsky, just like they have Point. They're almost playing that big four move.
Right.
Because the roster below them is strong enough. I mean, Tyler Johnson he's a quality centerman. He's a good second or third line guy. And in the case of having so many guys up front, he ends up being a third line guy where he could play a lot of second line in most teams throughout the league.
But then you have to think about their defense. They still have Victor Hedman, who came in third in the Norris Trophy race this year. He's probably on a big contract, or not. If not, he's going to deserve a big contract soon. They're just really limiting themselves and closing their window earlier than they really need to do.
Steven Stamkos is locked up until 23-24 season. So until the year 2024, getting ready to the 25 season, that's when he becomes an unrestricted free agent.
And at that point, he's probably going to retire because he's going to be in his late 30s by then.
He's 29 now, so you're talking, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So he'll be 34. I don't think he'll be ready for retirement there, but
he's not going to get another big contract like that, though. Most likely at that age.
No, I don't think he'll get a big contract, but I definitely think he'll be around in the league. He'll have some tread left on the tire. And again, who knows if he lasts until he's 34 with Tampa Bay. Maybe in 2 years, they do have to spend a little bit more money, and Stamkos becomes a trade bait value piece. You never know. But that is good news for Tampa Bay fans because they got a young star goaltender who has proven himself so far.
All right, moving on for the next bit of news. This one's a little bit of a retire tour here. Chris Kunitz calling it a career after 15 NHL seasons. He's a 4-time Stanley Cup champion. He won 2007 with Anaheim and then 3 titles with Pittsburgh in 09, 16, and 17. He's also an Olympic gold medalist. Hats off to a great career for Chris Kunitz. Yeah,
this one hits close to home. Being a Penguin fan, I know he won cups with other teams outside the Pittsburgh Penguins, but listen, he's a great player, and he won most of his cups in a black and gold uniform. Great guy. Just a character guy off the ice, a skilled guy on the ice, a good leader. He was a great player. He wouldn't necessarily wow you. He would just be always there, Mr. Reliable. You need a hit, he's got you. You need a play set up, he'll set that play up. You need a big goal, he'll deliver that big goal. He played a lot of time with Crosby because of that ability to not just shoot the puck when Crosby sets him up, but also to have that skill level to play at Crosby's level and deliver some big hits. So a great player, 619 career points, 268 goals. I mean, these are great numbers. Great numbers. Question is it Hall of Fame worthy?
That's what I was thinking, and I think the 4 Stanley Cups get him in.
I think so too. And that's the big thing. I mean, you're talking 4 cups. Not a lot of guys get to 1.
Right.
Not even get to 1. He won 4 of them. I mean, he was, if you had him on your team, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we could look this up, but I'm curious how many he's been to. I want to know his record. I don't think he lost very often.
I think he's 4-0 in the Stanley Cup Finals.
4-0. Look at the game-winning goals. 46 career game-winning goals. I mean, the guy averaged over 15 minutes on ice per game throughout his entire career. So just a great player, a 6 foot, 188-pound guy. That's you and me, John. That's you and me delivering these kind of numbers. Listen, like I said, this hits close to home. Chris Kunitz, hats off to him. And I think he's going to make a great analyst, too. I think he's going to do something in the booth or get himself on TV. He's a good-looking dude. Good-looking dude. So I'm happy for him. So with great play from a guy retiring, makes us think of the great play of the stars of the games. We didn't get a chance to do this, John, because you and I hadn't started our podcast. But over the offseason, every year, we have award winners in the NHL, just like any other sport. I don't think hockey gets quite the recognition on its awards. Certainly that football does. But even basketball, I think MVP race is more of a big topic, whereas Hart Trophy is less of that. I think part of it, too, and this could be a quick discussion before we even get to the award winners, I think part of the problem with the NHL awards that sometimes the casual fan doesn't know what the award is.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, all these names, it's great you have all these names memorializing a lot of these people, but sometimes it's so confusing. Like
Barry Trotz won the Jack Adams Award.
Right. What's the Jack Adams?
Sounds
Coach
like
of
a
the
beer.
Year.
Or sounds like a...
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. And it's like the Hart Trophy. That's the MVP, but the Ted Lindsay is the MVP based up on the players' vote.
The players' vote, right. And you can win it. I mean, Nikita Kucherov took home both this year. And that's not always the case. A lot of the times, the MVP, by voting, by the Hart Trophy, is not the same as the Ted Lindsay Award.
Usually the Art Ross Trophy winner for most points in the season wins it.
Correct.
Which I'm pretty sure Kucherov won that as well.
I believe he took home the Art Ross, yes. He did win the Art Ross. So, I mean, he swept. When we're talking about award winners, he cleaned house.
He did. Tampa Bay in general cleaned house. The only award they lost is John Cooper for Coach of the Year.
So let's break these down, John. Let's go one by one. Let's figure out why these guys won. Do we agree? Because listen, part of the podcast is our opinion. Again, by the way, we do have ways to get at the show if you want to hear us discuss what you're curious about, whether it even be fantasy hockey advice. You in a fantasy league, John?
I am not for hockey. I played it years ago and I haven't been back. I won, so no one wanted me back in their league.
I've been in a 10-year, 12-year, something like that, fantasy hockey league. My brothers and I kind of started it, and it has grown into a real thing. Came off my first championship.
Nice.
I've been to the finals, I think, 4 times, so I'm 1 for 5. It's not a pretty number. It's not. I'm more like the Bills, but ultimately, it was great to get that championship. My boy Jordan Bennington helped me to a championship. We'll get to why I was upset that he didn't get his name called on this night. But let's break down these awards. So the Hart Trophy, the MVP, the best player in the league. I don't think there's any discussion. It goes to Nikita Kucherov.
Yeah. I mean, he just blew out the competition. 128 points. He had 41 goals, 87 assists. Second place was Sidney Crosby. He only had 100 points. Only 100 points. Awesome, but...
Only 100, yeah, I know. Compared to 128, I mean, that's not fair.
Kucherov, he's the first player, he has the most points by any player since the 95-96 season with his 128 points.
Yeah, to Super Mario. That's a great name to follow up and be right behind.
And 38 multi-point games this year.
By the way,
insane.
Most points for a Russian-born player. Let me repeat that for you Ovechkin fans. Most points for a Russian-born player. He broke the record set by Alexander McGinley, 127 back with Buffalo in 92-93. So I like it. A little shout out to McGinley. He was a Maple Leaf for a little while. Listen, it's an amazing season. There's really nothing else to say about it. I think he was a no-doubter from game one. As soon as the puck dropped on the season last year, he really ran away with the race all year long.
The only problem I have with this award is not that Kucherov won. It's that Crosby got second place and McDavid got third. Because McDavid had 116 points. He had more goals and more assists and more total points. And still came in third.
You're sweating over the wrong things, John.
And he played one less game than Crosby.
Speaking of games, Kucherov playing all 82 games. I think that's also really impressive. Had at least 1 point in 62 of 82 games.
I know I got a little carried away with the Crosby-McDavid talk, but who cares about second and third? They're both the first losers. I couldn't believe that Crosby got second place over McDavid.
Well, listen, I mean, McDavid, he won it in 2016-17. You expect that from McDavid. There's nothing surprising to me about that.
You expect it from Crosby, too.
Yeah, but I think because Malkin wasn't so much of a factor, I think Crosby did a lot more this year to put the team on his back. And I think they just looked at how much more he had to bear, whereas McDavid did about the same. And again, Crosby and the Penguins made the playoffs.
Right.
McDavid and the Oilers still can't find a way to make the playoffs. And I'm not putting that on McDavid, but I am saying that has to factor in.
That's fair. That's fair.
Has to factor in. All right, so the Hart goes to Nikita Kucherov. The best defenseman, the Norris Trophy. I think it was the right decision as well. Went to Mark Giordano out of Calgary. The dude was a point machine this year. And don't get me wrong, I love me some Brent Burns. I had him on my team as well this fantasy season. So he delivered for me in a big way. But San Jose, I think, was more stacked along that blue line. So, Burns playing alongside Carlson, I think, takes a load off that allows him to play more free. Whereas Giordano doesn't have that luxury. He is the clear-cut number one guy on the blue line in Calgary. So he had to deliver, and he stepped up, and he did.
Looking at strictly stats, goals, assists, points, I was so flabbergasted as to why Giordano won this over Burns. Then I went and looked deeper in the stats, looked at plus minus and shorthanded goals, everything. 100% on board with Giordano. He set career highs with 57 assists and 74 points this year. He was second in the NHL defenseman, 4 points. He's also 35. He's aging. He's probably going to call it a career in probably less than 5 years. And he had the best season he's ever had.
Right, and that's why I say he's a point machine. Burns obviously was better, but for what he is normally capable of, putting up almost 60 assists, I mean, that's incredible. And the big number you said was the plus-minus.
It's plus-minus, plus 39. He led all NHL skaters, not just defensemen, everyone with a plus 39. He has to win this trophy. And 4 shorthanded goals tied him for the most in the NHL among defensemen.
Yeah, it was an incredible year. I mean, just look at, again, going back to that plus-minus number, I find this actually kind of flabbergasting. His NHL career, he's plus 94. He almost doubled his career plus-minus total in one season.
That's incredible.
What? That's wild. Again, we both agree. Problem is, big problem for Calgary. I don't think he is capable of not only maintaining, but keeping this up for even just one more year. I think we're going to see a decline in Mark Giordano. I think winning an award always takes the pressure off a player. And he's 35, so he hit, theoretically, unless the Calgary Flames win the Stanley Cup, he hit his climax. That is the peak of his career, winning the Norris Trophy. And hats off to him. But where does that motivation continue to lie, and does he have enough fuel? I mean, everybody has a drop-off, but does he have enough fuel left in the tank to maintain Norris Trophy-type performances and seasons? I know it's a young team up there, but they're going to have to figure out that blue line, and they got to figure out that blue crease, too. They have a lot of blue problem up in the sea of red in Calgary.
I think it's great that Noah Hannafin, one of the young stars for the Calgary Flames on defense, is getting to learn from Mark Giordano, one of the greatest that's laced them up.
That's very true. And when you have a guy like Giordano, he's a great leader in the sense that very much like Chara. I mean, he's going to pass the knowledge. He's not going to try to give you an example. Remember Sergei Gonchar?
Yes.
I love me some Sarge. He played great in a Penguins uniform, but the issue with Serge is he held on to being the number one guy on that power play for too long, and he was reluctant to give it up. Whereas guys like Giordano, he doesn't mind taking a backseat role. He's just going to do his thing. Chara doesn't mind taking that backseat role. When you have a guy like that, that's when the understudies, that's when the younger guys can really learn. So they're set up there. It just matters what happens. Their offense is good. They're set. Calgary is going to be just fine. I just don't know what they're going to do in the blue paint. They brought in Cam Talbot this offseason. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's a head scratcher.
I think David Rittich is the answer. I think David Rittich is solid. In fact, I'm almost angry for Rittich after the year that he put up for them. David Rittich had phenomenal numbers this past season, and he struggled down the stretch. His last, say, month of the season, he wasn't really all that great. Letting in a lot of goals, wasn't delivering where he could. But he was 27. I'm sorry, that's his career. But we'll get the stat in a second. But he had a great year nonetheless. And what bothers me about it is just because he had a rough finish to the end of the year, they made it. And Mike Smith finished nicely. So then they made it a goalie competition. And then they were like, you know what? Mike Smith, he's going to be our goalie in the playoffs. And it didn't give your young goaltender, David Rittich, who is only 26, that's pretty good. You didn't give him any playoff experience. And this is a guy who went in 42 games started, went 27, 9, and 5.
Wow.
27, 9, and 5.
That would be top of the league.
He was there. I mean, he was there. His save percentage, 9-11, 2.61 goals against average. A guy who was trended down in the goals against average and trended up in the save percentage every single year. He's played 3 years in the NHL. I don't see what the issue is. And now you're bringing Cam Talbot, who they're talking about trying to resurrect his career.
How many times have we heard that?
He went to Philly, and we heard the same thing. The guy's burnt out. He played a lot behind Lundqvist. He looked good as a backup. Then they sent him out. Kudos to the Rangers for getting something for Talbot. Edmonton burned him out. I mean, played pretty much 82 games in the entire season. Burned him out the first year. He played well, but burned him out and was never the same goalie since. And I think has yet to find it. So not to go off in a tangent, but Calgary, wake up. You got your answer. That's close to home to your buddy, right? Vancouver out there?
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk about them. They're coming up. I think they made an appearance at the NHL Awards this offseason. So Norris Trophy winner, Mark Giordano, congratulations to him. We talked about the Vezina. That's Andrei Vasilevsky. I was maybe in favor of Bishop as well, or not in favor. Either one of them could have won, and I would be happy.
See, I had to go Vasilevsky on this just because of his win total. 39 wins, led the league. That's unreal. But they're also a team that
at the team in front
tied the record for most wins in a season. He only lost consecutive starts one time all season, and it was in overtime.
That's incredible. That's a fantastic stat.
13-0-1 following a loss. And he had 6 shutouts that was 4th in the league.
Wow.
I think it was well-deserved. I mean, it was hard to give. Ben Bishop's numbers were great, too. He was 27, 15-2. He had a 1.98 goals against average and a 9.34 save percentage. That's awesome.
I think he was the only big-time starter outside of Binnington who had a sub-2 goals against average. He definitely led the league individually. I know the Islanders led the league as a team.
Right.
But Bishop himself led the league, I believe, in goals against average. You can confirm on that. Yeah, I mean, you can go either way. So you're with me?
Yeah, Vasilevsky all the way.
Okay. Let's get to the Calder Trophy.
Now, first episode, we debated this a little bit. Now we're going to get a little deeper into it.
We dipped our toe into it. The Calder, being the Rookie of the Year, went to Elias Pettersson. I think needed to go to Jordan Binnington. I understand Pettersson had a great year. I understand he almost put up 30 goals as a rookie. But he was playing time with Brock Besser. He was slated in first-line minutes. That's big. That's ice time. That's exposure. That's experience. And he got that experience from day one. Binnington had to work his way through the system and get to that crease and take it from a goalie who was already there, Jake Allen. And he took a team that was in dead last, brought them to a Stanley Cup. I don't want to count the Stanley Cup run as part of what's weighing into that factor, but I can't help it. I really can't. I mean, he wins the Stanley Cup as a rookie. He's got to be the best rookie.
But he only played less than half the games in the season, and it's hard.
Is that his fault?
It's not his fault, but it just happened. Like he had something you can't control, and if he had more games, who knows? Maybe his numbers get even better. But you have to imagine that maybe there's some inflation to his numbers, and it drops him out because he had some really shaky games in the playoffs.
I guess what bothers me the most is that's my point. Fine, his sample size is smaller. That's a 100% true statement. But it's not like they both came from the same thing. They were draft players, and one just made the starting lineup, the other one didn't. Like, it was a working through the system type of thing. To me, MVP sample size should matter. For the Calder Trophy, sample size should matter a lot less. A lot less. Because you're talking about rookies. So you're talking about a number of guys who may not get to start as early as Elias Pettersson did because Vancouver was in such disarray that they needed him right away. Well, the St. Louis Blues thought they had Jake Allen. They thought they were covered, so they didn't need Binnington right away. However, he still put up, 30-something games or starts? I mean, he still put up a legitimate sample size. Enough to the point where then I focus not on how much they played, but what they did in their time playing. And I think Binnington made a far larger impact. That's what I can't let go of, I guess.
Well, other than that, of him not playing most of the season, the reason I've taken Pettersson is just the straight-up facts and the straight-up stats. He 28 goals, 38 assists, 66 points, 10 power play goals, and 7 game-winning goals, all led the NHL rookies. He also he beat Pavel Burr's record for the Canucks of a rookie scoring record. He also became the 6th rookie ever to record multiple 5-point games in a season. Those are just some outlandish numbers.
They are.
And I think that's mainly why he won. And it has nothing to do with how good the Canucks were as a team this year because they were bad. But he was the bright star there. And Brock Besser is a great young talent, but he did not live up to the hype he did in his rookie season.
He didn't. Injuries plagued him a little bit. Listen, I'm not opposed to Pettersson. I'm comfortable, and I kind of had a feeling I knew he was going to be selected as that winner. So it's not a problem. I guess I'm not mad about it in that sense. But when you talk about January 7th, you put Jordan Binnington in for his first start. He puts up a shutout. And he never looked back from there. And by the way, around January 7th, I think it was January 3rd to be exact, that the Blues were last place in the entire league. Not their division, not their conference, but the entire league. You put this man in behind that team, that last place team, and he pushes them to a playoff win. Remember those David Rittich numbers I just told you? And you said, wow, those are really good numbers?
Binnington's were better. And even 24-5. I mean, to me, that's still a full season. It's not, but it is. I mean, it's a full season win total. I'll put it that way. 24-30. I mean, that's a solid season in terms of win total for a starting goalie. He just only had 5 losses. That's the difference. He was great when he lost a game because he never lost 2 in a row. Or at least, I think he only lost 2 in a row once. I think he was like 14-0-1 in his games after a loss. He was fantastic, and that held true through the playoffs. He was great. 189 goals against average. That beats Ben Bishop. I mean, now we're talking about a different guy who could be even contending for the Vezina. You're not gonna switch me to Pettersson? No,
I'm not gonna knock you for agreeing with Pettersson.
Right, and I know it's vice versa, the same way. Like I'm not gonna switch to Vasilevsky.
That's fair. Well, Pettersson does win the Calder. We'll see what Besser and Pettersson can do in year 2 for Pettersson and year 3 for Besser. You're right. Besser's got to turn it up a notch if Vancouver wants to be a better team. They certainly need his services to be better. I still think they have a goaltending issue. I think they need a lot more talent around those two guys. Except for your buddy. What's his name, by the way? Can we give him a shout out?
Yeah, shout out to buddy Mark Rooney from college. Big Vancouver Canucks fan, and we used to battle all the time in college of who's better, Bruins, Canucks. It was always the Bruins. Sorry, Mark, I'm the one with the podcast, not you.
Well, and you're also the one with the ring in the back pocket as a fan.
That's right.
Happened in Vancouver too.
That's right.
Not to bring up bad things.
Yeah, we'll give him a little love throughout time to time because he is that Vancouver Canucks fan. You don't see them in this part of the country where we are. So yeah, we'll talk some Canucks. And Mark, I was backing you up there. Pettersson for the Calder all the way.
Mark, love Pettersson. You guys hit a home run with him, but Binnington is the man. Binnington is the man. I'm telling you, he got robbed.
Moving on.
Real quick, one more thing on the Vancouver Canucks. Since we're already out on the West Coast, we might as well talk about them. They should bring back their old school jerseys. The striped one with the V there. Come on now.
Yeah.
They got some funky jerseys. You know the bumblebees for the Steelers?
Yes.
They got some pretty much like bumblebees of their own.
I like their maroon red ones they wore for a Winter Classic one year.
Yeah,
or one of the outdoor games. Anyway.
Outdoor games. Yeah, they haven't had a Winter Classic. Well, they do the Canadian outdoor series. So them and Calgary have done games outdoors. So
I love those maroon jerseys they had. Those were awesome.
Those are sharp. They got a lot. I love old school jerseys. I'm just a big fan of old school anything. I think that they were talking about the Devils bringing back the Colorado Rockies jersey.
Ooh, yes.
That would be cool. That's a nice color. Problem is that's that Colorado Avalanche maroon. So
right.
Doesn't vibe, but hey, if the Penguins could be blue, then yeah, you'll get a lot of Penguin talk on here. You can either get mad at me on Twitter at Brian Goralnik or tweet the show at Fresh Ice Pod, or just get over it. It's not going to stop. Like John said, this is our podcast, so if you're gonna listen, you got to hear it. Calder is Pettersson. That he wins the Calder Trophy. We could talk about Ryan O'Reilly. Again, I mean, we talked about before this show even started how some of these unquantifiable awards, I mean, with the Selke, yeah, it's fewest penalty minutes sometimes. I mean, they got to be good guys, right? And they can't. Well, if you're heavily penalized, you're not going to necessarily win that award.
It seemed like this year it was mostly based off of face-offs and plus-minus, because Patrice Bergeron is without a doubt the best offensive defense. He is without a doubt the best defensive. Oh my God. He is without a doubt the best defensive offensive player in the NHL, and I think the 8 consecutive Selke nominations proves that. Now, I'm not necessarily saying he should have won over O'Reilly this year because O'Reilly's numbers were better.
Yeah.
But just to have him there 8 years in a row and to be tied with the most Selke Award winnings of all time with 4, it's insane.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you look at what he did on the ice. He was on the ice. He averaged over 20 minutes of ice time. It has everything plays into this. So for the people who don't necessarily understand what the Selke is John, you said it exactly. It's the best defensive player forward. The best defensive forward is the right terminology. So face-offs is big. Staying out at the box is big. Ice time is big. A lot of times these guys are your penalty killers. You said it. Patrice Bergeron, Ryan O'Reilly. They do pretty much everything. Takeaway percentage comes into this. How many giveaways they have. Plus minus, if I didn't mention that, that's huge. He was a plus 22. I mean, that's 7th in the league. He was phenomenal. But there's a lot of factors that go into it. So I don't disagree. I think really anybody on that list could have won it. I think Patrice could have won it again. He's won it many times. I think he could have had another.
This stat is not going to really back up O'Reilly or Bergeron for either or. It's just an awesome stat that has both of them in it. So Ryan O'Reilly this year joined Patrice Bergeron as the only 2 players in NHL history to post 1,000 or more face-off wins in 4 consecutive seasons.
Wow. That's pretty good.
That's insane. It's so crazy how these numbers are just ridiculous. Both those guys deserve to be in this conversation every year.
Yeah, and shout out to Mark Stone. Mark Stone actually edged out Bergeron for second, if you want to get back into the second, third conversation.
No, I'm past it now. I just had to hate on Crosby for a little bit.
Oh, whatever. He came in 4th right behind Bergie. He made his mark still anyways. So the Selke, the best defensive forward, goes to Ryan O'Reilly. The Jack Adams Award, Coach of the Year. Barry Trotz takes this home for the Islanders, and I'm completely proud of the NHL for getting this one right. Because
Absolutely.
John Cooper could have easily taken it home. Not that that would have been the wrong decision, but in my opinion, it would have been the wrong decision.
You could even argue for the guy that came in third place, Craig Berube, who.
Yeah.
But I feel the same way I feel about Binnington and the Calder. He just wasn't there the entire time. And I mean, it may be more impressive that he was only there for the second half of the season, brought them out of the basement to win the Stanley Cup.
Did he or did Binnington?
Oh, okay. We're going to go there, huh? No, I just think Berube brings a different style of coaching. He's a player's coach, but he's also in your face, and he's going to tell it like it is. And I think certain guys like that, and they feed off his energy, and they play his style of hard-hitting and hard-nosed, in-your-face hockey.
They do. It's a nice style of hockey. It's looking to be the style of hockey that's winning, that where the Stars used to kind of dominate. You know, in the Crosby era, even in the Detroit era. Think about how heavily loaded they were up front. Don't get me wrong, Mike Babcock was a tremendous coach for the Red Wings. I like Mike Babcock. I think he does a solid job with the Maple Leafs. He's got to figure that thing out, though, because they have too much talent not to be advancing. I think their Achilles, though, is just they got to not face the damn Bruins in the playoffs. If they could just get the first round and not face the Bruins, and then maybe have to face them down the road, but at least just get that series victory under their belt. But it feels like every time they have the team and they get to the playoffs, they are playing the Bruins first round. And that's part of the playoff system. And that's what they want out of the playoffs for the NHL. I mean, that was the whole idea behind this, is that now your rivalries are more highlighted, and divisions, your wins and losses and where you rank in your division matters more, because as the 2 and 3 team in your division, are you going to have home ice? Boston had home ice this year, and you saw what it did. In Boston, I think, made a late push. I mean, they were strong to finish out the year as well.
No, they were good for the second half of the season.
Well, that's what I mean. Boston didn't start in that conversation.
Right. Yeah, no, they were out of the playoff picture for early in the year.
Turned it around.
That's right.
You know, they got healthy. They brought some guys back, and that's what turned it around. So when you look at Boston making that second half of the season push, that's huge for them, because that gave them home ice. That gave them, what they needed to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. And when they had that opportunity to stay alive in Game 6 and bring it back home, that's what happened. So that's huge for the NHL. We could talk about that, because I'm curious what you think. A lot of people hate the playoff format.
I don't know. I really got to think about it.
I think that's a conversation for a different show.
Yeah.
We got plenty of time for that. But that is a conversation worth having, because a lot of people who don't like it, especially when you do see second-round matchups of the Hurricanes and the Islanders. It's not ideal for the NHL.
No, but just getting back to the Jack Adams, we talked about this a little earlier. Barry Trotz is awesome. He well-deserved just for the turnaround he had with the Islanders. They had a 23-point improvement from last year. They allowed the most goals in the league last year. This year, they allowed the least amount. It's the first time in 100 years that a team has gone from giving up the most to allowing the least in back-to-back years. It's just incredible, the defensive structure he brings to that team.
First team in 100 years. Actually, the Senators did it in 1918 and 1919. So, yeah, a long time. And you have to squarely put that on Trotz's shoulders. He came in off of winning a Stanley Cup, and he had a team that got worse. Let Tavares go, didn't re-sign him, had Robin Lehner, Thomas Greiss. Lehner, what did he really do in Buffalo?
Nothing.
Thomas Greiss has had some solid outings for New York. He's been there for a little bit now, but nothing to the point that you would think that they're going to be the best defensive team and allow the fewest goals in the league.
He's never been a number one guy in his career.
Think about their defensive unit, the blue line. They don't have any stars on that blue line.
I don't think I can name more than 5 guys on the Islanders. Realistically, I just can't. It's a bunch of rookies and young guys that are trying to make their way into the league, and they had an awesome season.
They did. And guys who haven't had success, found success, guys like Valtteri Filppula, guys like Jordan Eberle, people who on other teams were more of a dud, more of a flame out. Now, all of a sudden, they found success. And it wasn't in big ways. None of these guys were going to ever contend for most goals or most points or anything like that. But they had a lot of 20-goal scorers. They had a good mix of, 50-point getters. I mean, they had just a good average, a good median of points throughout their players. And again, when you couple that with how stifling they were defensively, it really falls on Barry Trotz's system. And I'm curious about what the Islanders are going to do again this year. Problem for them is they don't have Robin Lehner anymore. So that's one piece that's gone. And again, they're going to need that same kind of defensive performance all year long for them to be relevant. If they are even just a little less good defensively, they don't have the scoring power to keep up with the rest of the league. So that's a good year, though, for Barry Trotz. Congratulations. That's not a bad 2 years when you think about that. Coming off a Stanley Cup win, first in franchise history for the Capitals, leading them to that. Then not being re-signed by the Capitals, being literally let go, you could walk away, and being coach of the year. I mean, that's a pretty good run, Barry Trotz.
No, he resigned from the Capitals and then took the Islanders job. They didn't let him go. He resigned.
Because he wasn't going to get a new contract.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was the whole backstory.
He wanted a new. He was essentially a free agent. He was with them, but it was like a restricted free agent, I guess, if you want to say. Like,
gotcha.
You know, they were in talks, and I think they had some sort of contract stipulation or something, but he was able to walk away from, So it was a situation where Washington didn't want to pony up a penny. They just were content thinking, hey, we have the roster. It's not the coach that makes the team. It's the roster. So with that being said, are they right? Are they wrong? I don't know, because Washington still had a pretty good year. I don't think Barry Trotz would have been the difference maker allowing the Capitals to win another cup. But you could certainly see what they lost, because Barry Trotz taking the Islanders to where they were is just a tremendous job. So congratulations to him winning the Jack Adams Coach of the Year and the GM of the Year. As we have a little bit of GM news, actually. We'll touch on a couple other things, but the GM of the Year to Don Sweeney, who had a great job just kind of working his team, setting up the Bruins for what they needed to be. Again, we talked about Boston, how they didn't start the year where they needed to be. And in a Eastern Conference loaded with talent, loaded at the top, and in a division where the division was gone from day one, I think he did a great job picking up right pieces. I mean, look at the impact that Charlie Coyle had, that even Johansson had. I mean, these guys came through. They came through, and I think it was worth it to get rid of Donato, even though he's flourished in Minnesota a little bit. I think it was worth it because Coyle was an impact player throughout the postseason.
Right, and Donato just didn't fit the Boston Bruins system. They were trying to grow him into it from his days. He's a Boston kid. His dad's coach at Harvard.
Yeah,
but he just didn't really fit the system, and it stinks because he was a fan favorite. A lot of people liked him and wanted to see him have success in Boston. But we wish him the best in Minnesota. He's going to be great.
Problem for the Bruins, real quick on Donato, I think he's too much of what David Pastrnak is.
Yes.
They already have.
He is David Pastrnak and Jake DeBrusk in one player.
But not as good as either one of them.
Right.
So when you look at that, it becomes an easier decision.
I think the GM of the Year award kind of gets overlooked because people don't realize the work that the GMs have to do to make the teams that go on to win Stanley Cups and everything. And I know the Bruins didn't win the Stanley Cup this year, but they made it back to the Stanley Cup for the first time since 2012, 2013. And I think just the numbers alone, like they had the most players on the ice this season. They went through 37 players because of injury.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. They were a team decimated, and it wasn't just third or fourth line guys. We're talking stars. We're talking, at one point Patrice, at one point Pastrnak. I think Marchand might have even missed a little time. So, and Chara was out for extended periods of time.
Charlie McAvoy was out.
out.
Krug was out at the beginning.
That's right.
Carlo missed some time.
So, you're almost talking about top six players, in defense and offense. I mean, it's insane how they were able to be where they were at the end of the year. It really is. He did a great job. And when we look at the trade deadline and what they did, and there was so many other players out there, Artemi Panarin and these guys, Duchesne, Stone, and then all of a sudden the Bruins come up with, Johansson and Coyle. We were laughing at the Bruins. Well, maybe not you. You're a Bruins guy. I was laughing at the Bruins. What are they thinking? They're missing out on big-name players. They need scoring. Well, they certainly got scoring because Charlie Coyle picked up his game. The two combined for 27 points in their time in a Bruins uniform in the rest of the last season. So, I mean, they delivered 13 goals, 14 assists. That is what you're looking for.
They were awesome in the playoffs too, and they were the reason. They were a big factor in getting to the Stanley Cup Finals. Without them, you don't get past Columbus.
No.
You don't get past Carolina.
Nope.
And maybe you don't even go 7 games against St. Louis.
Right. They definitely tapered off a little bit. I think their worst series of the entire postseason was the finals.
Right.
But they were major factors. I mean, more important than the top line because that went very cold in the playoffs for you guys.
Yes, it did.
And all of a sudden it was the Charlie Coyles and the Johanssons and the DeBrusks that were scoring in your early round games and getting you to that point. So you're absolutely right. They were the perfect fit. And I think it was an easy call for Don Sweeney to be the coach of the year. So congratulations. GM of the year. So congratulations to Mr. Sweeney. We'll see what he could do. Next year the Bruins, I think, need to make some moves, need to add a few pieces here and there. Again, I personally think their blue line is their weaker part, especially with the age of Chara. I know you disagree with that.
I disagree pretty strongly with that.
We're going to see how that pans out. I don't want to put so much on Tuukka Rask's shoulders. And I think a lot of last season, a lot of your defensive flaws and holes were covered up by Tuukka's phenomenal year. So, we'll see. It remains to be seen, but I think you can still agree that they're not Stanley Cup ready just yet.
No, I think next year is going to be an eye-opening for everyone that's a Boston Bruins fan that, hey, this team, while good, is not good enough. No. And there's some pieces missing. And with the contracts we have, it's tough to fill the void we need, but I'm sure Don Sweeney will get something done. He is GM of the year.
He is GM of the year. I mean, the award backs it up. How about the NHL 2020 cover? We're talking, Xbox, PlayStation, your favorite gaming console. NHL 20 came out. Austin Matthews.
I'm excited for it. I think this is a great choice. It could be anybody. I would have been happy with anybody as long as it wasn't, a New York Ranger. But
yeah, well,
I don't think there was a Ranger to put on the cover.
Who are they going to put on? Their best bet would be Artemi Panarin. And
yes, and he probably would have been wearing Columbus.
Yeah, well, not too far.
Not anymore, but
not too far off in terms of the color scheme.
But you mentioned something to me that I didn't even know about.
Interesting. So NHL 20 is the first year that they are incorporating all the team's mascots. Yes. This is because Gritty made so many headlines throughout last season, and I think this is great for hockey. If they could find any reason to be in the news, especially for a family-friendly, fun environment like a mascot brings, that is huge. That is a great marketability area for NHL, and I think they missed the opportunity to put Gritty on the face of NHL 20 because it is the first year the game will include all of the mascots. I believe you could even do, and they did it in football. I know in football games I've played it. I believe you could play a mascot game.
Awesome. That is awesome. I was hoping they were going to add that, and I was going to ask you about it.
Imagine seeing Gritty on the ice, the hair
awesome.
flowing.
It'd be so great.
Talk about hockey flow. That is some hockey flow to its finest. Austin Matthews has some good hockey flow too.
Yeah, and
he's got some great hair.
He's the new stylist of the NHL. Basically, he's on GQ all the time now, and dressing up to the nines.
To the nines?
I don't know. Is that the term?
Is it the tens?
No, I thought it was the nines.
The nines?
I'm gonna cut that part out because I don't know.
I like that. I like just to the nines. I'll roll with it. Well, then if he dresses to the nines, then we'll do our show to the nines. In fact, I think we're here until the 8s. Okay, we're not at the nines yet. Well, Austin Matthews has his buddy Mitch Marner too, so the both of them, like to style it up, like to schnazz it up a little bit. No more Patrick Marleau. Maple Leafs gave a fortune to give away Patrick Marleau. Yeah. Listen, anyways, we got a lot more to talk about. I think we're out of time here, John.
Yeah, we're coming up to that time.
We keep talking about how we want to extend the show. Our first show was nice and concise, around 30 minutes. I don't think we hit the 30-minute mark today.
Might be a little longer than 30.
That's okay. We appreciate you sticking in with us. Once again, this has been Fresh Ice alongside John Gallo. You could find him at J_Gallo26 on Twitter. You could find me at Brian Goralnik on Twitter, or find the show. Just hit us both up at the same time, tweeting at Fresh Ice Pod, all one word, or you could always email the show, freshicepod@gmail.com. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Find our show, spread it out. We appreciate you doing so, and certainly ask some questions. Be involved. If you want to hear us debate something, talk about anything, curious about anything, want advice, we're your go-to guys about that. John, It's been a pleasure as always.
Another great episode. Can't wait to do the next one.
For sure. This has been Fresh Ice. Thanks for listening.